Welcome to the TeachStrong podcast. My name's Sam Hart. I'm a primary school teacher on a mission to help school staff discover truly effective approaches to wellbeing. And this show is a platform for me to bring you the knowledge and experience of real experts who can break down the research and the tools that we can apply to our everyday lives to feel happier and healthier. Today I'm talking to Dr Nicola Cann. Nicola, aka the Family Sleep Consultant, is passionate about helping families and professionals better understand sleep for children of all ages. Through Nicola's training and coaching, she is helping people address this absolutely vital area of wellbeing. Now, I've been really eager to get a sleep expert on the show for a long time now, so I'm really grateful to Nicola, who has a wealth of experience in this field, for offering us her time. I know from my own experience working in a school and talking to friends and family that sleep is an area that many people are struggling with. You only have to scroll down Twitter for a couple of seconds to find someone who is talking about their lack of sleep and asking for advice. And that's what this episode and this podcast is all about, helping you educators discover the tools to address the areas of your health and wellbeing that are a priority for you. During our conversation, Nicola tells us more about the importance of sleep for adults and children and the tips that she offers for young people and for those who work in a school as well. So, enjoy the show. So, hello Nicola and welcome to the TeachStrong podcast.
Hi Samuel, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Like I say to all my guests, I just really appreciate the time that people offer to come on the show and talk about their particular area of expertise and, use this conversation to put it out there to the teaching audience that hopefully can improve their well-being in whatever different area of lifestyle that we happen to be covering. And today we're covering sleep, aren't we?
Yes.
And I thought we could start with a quote, Nicola. I thought we could start with a quote from the sleep expert and researcher, Dr. Matthew Walker. And he describes sleep as the Swiss Army knife of health. So what does he mean by this?
I love this quote. It's a fantastic analogy for sleep. I think it really reflects the multiple ways that we know about and are still learning about that sleep contributes towards physical health, mental health, emotional well-being. There's a lot of information online about different health outcomes that are related to good sleep and good quality sleep. A lot of that can feel a bit like scaremongering. It's not necessarily that poor sleep causes these outcomes, but there's a lot of things that are related there. But I think that analogy about this Swiss Army knife really shows that sleep can be the tool to address some of these issues, and not just about fixing problems necessarily, but it's actually just a great thing for us, a tool that we should all be using, something that can help us address multiple areas of functioning in our day-to-day lives. It's something so practical. Everyone should have that Swiss Army knife in their back pocket because it's something we all do that every day. If we're all getting good sleep, then loads of positive outcomes can come from that. So it's not just about the avoidance of illness, but it's a lot more about what positive outcomes can come from that as well, and the different ways that we can address our sleep needs.
Interesting, yeah. And so, what are the kind of specific effects that good quality and duration of sleep have on our well-being? And maybe even if I know that you mentioned we don't want to, be too negative around this, do we? Because that can then cause some stress and anxiety around sleep. But if you don't mind mentioning some of the aspects of what happens if we don't get enough sleep, or we can just focus on the more positive. So what effect does good quality and duration of sleep have on our well-being?
Yeah, sure. I think it's important to know what the negatives are so that we know what we're looking out for, and actually that can be motivating to people as well to know what unhelpful things we're avoiding by getting good sleep. So I think looking at both aspects is really useful. And I'm glad you asked about quality and duration of sleep, because that's something that is increasingly being recognised as things that have separate impacts. A lot of the conversations I have with parents, with schools, are about how much sleep people should be getting. But we're recognising more and more that actually it's a lot of those positive outcomes are really about the quality of sleep. And that the duration of sleep is something that's quite variable for different people. Still important, but again, like you said as well, the worrying about sleep is something that can make all of these things much, much worse. That's really where the psychology of it comes in. So it's really important to know how to get good sleep and and feel like you have control over that and not be worrying about it too much. In terms of the outcomes, there's a lot of the health outcomes, not outcomes necessarily, the links between health and sleep are to things like obesity, malnutrition, chronic tiredness, mental health outcomes. Negative outcomes would be things like depression, anxiety, all of those kinds of things. Basically, all the sorts of things you could imagine can be made worse if we're not getting good sleep. Conversely, if we are getting good sleep, then all of the good stuff can happen. People, I'm sure all of your listeners will have had at least one night of poor sleep in their lives. So maybe reflect on how that felt for just one day. And the getting through the day can be so hard. Emotionally, we're less resilient. We're probably a bit more volatile. Our capacity to think through decisions and to plan cleverly, use all of those kind of cognitive functions, decline quite dramatically. We're forgetful. We might struggle to get on with our colleagues or to manage our social relationships. And then thinking about how that actually might, the cumulative effect of that. So one night of poor sleep actually isn't going to have a massive impact. We recover from that incredibly quickly. Humans are very, very resilient. But if someone has ongoing sleep difficulties, then that stuff starts to build up over time. And that's when it becomes more concerning. So thinking about how much sleep you're getting, but not getting too focused on that, and thinking about actually what's the impact of my sleep. Am I noticing that I am feeling tired during the day? Are my relationships with my friends or family suffering because of this? Am I cognitively as on the ball as I would like to be? These are all things to consider when you're thinking about the outcomes of your own quality and duration of sleep.
Right, interesting. Yeah, and this is something that I've thought about more recently and kind of had my eyes open to, the quality aspect, where I didn't think about that at all. I just thought, like you said, that it's just all about duration. Growing up, I just heard about the 7 to 9 hours of sleep, which I was always pretty good at getting. But then sometimes you'd think, well, I've got that 8 hours or even more than 8 hours sometimes, and I still am waking up not feeling great. And that's when further research and finding out the tips from the experts around your environment and your habits just before you go to bed, about actually, you might be getting the full 8 hours, but is that a kind of a light sleep and a disrupted sleep? I had a room that was quite light even during the night, and so I think I was getting up during the night. Maybe I'd kind of been drinking loads of water, thought I've got to stay hydrated, and of course that meant I was getting up to go to the toilet in the middle of the night, maybe more than one occasion. And so it's little things like that when you find out. And I think you can really notice the difference when I think everyone's felt that, haven't they? When they've had a deep, long sleep and you wake up going, wow. It's that feeling of where you wake up and you go, oh, what? How is it when, I thought my head on the pillow and now I'm waking up, the alarm's going off. And that, I guess, is that the goal? Is that what we can do every night? Is that what we're aiming for?
Wouldn't that be amazing? Can you imagine if everyone across the world every morning woke up feeling that refreshed? That would be spectacular. I think the trouble is that people set goals for themselves around sleep that can be unhelpful. And like you say, the focus on duration, that's a key thing I come across all the time. I'm often being asked how long somebody should sleep for, whereas actually I'm way more interested in how tired they are, what quality was their sleep, did they struggle to get to sleep, and the more nuanced stuff there. So I think the thing is, if we're paying too much attention to sleep, we're less likely to get good sleep. So there's some kind of paradox there that makes it quite complicated. If we were all sleeping great all the time, we'd never even be thinking about how to sleep. Good sleepers don't have to think about how to sleep. They're not paying attention to it. So we can do things to help ourselves get better sleep. So getting into those good routines, like you mentioned, making sure we're exercising well, eating at the right times, eating sensible food, thinking about our emotional well-being. But actually, the getting good sleep part is really just part of having an overall good and healthy life, really. Something I promote a lot is thinking about what you're doing during the daytime as well, because in fact, when you exercise, for example, what time you first go out and get daylight, those sorts of things can have a massive impact on your sleep. And people who are struggling to sleep are often really focused on their bedtime routine or using their smartwatch to monitor how many hours of sleep they've had. None of those things are really helping, not not a lot at least. The daytime stuff can be way more useful.
Yeah. And I just see so many mirrors of that in other aspects of lifestyle and well-being, like, for example, healthy eating. I love the fact that you said, good sleepers are not thinking about their sleep too much, are they? It's just that they've set up the habits and the routines to sleep well, and then they don't have to think about it. And I think that's like healthy eating. People say to me, like, you seem to be eating healthily all the time. Like, what's your secret? And it's like, it's just those habits, isn't it? And just a little bit of knowledge, and then practicing it and making it the easiest option, that kind of thing. Also with exercise, I think, we don't need all the trackers and the fancy equipment and the really expensive gym membership. If that's your kind of thing and you like doing that, that's absolutely fine. I always say that. But at the same time, if you're just looking to get more physical activity, then it can be really basic, can't it? Really simple. It's just about the habits and doing things consistently.
Yeah. And I think that's I guess we'll probably come to this, but a key role for teachers is promoting that kind of thinking and all of those positive outcomes and positive lifestyle choices that we can help younger people make, so that they're not having to worry about sleep. The best thing you can do to turn a short-term sleep problem into a chronic sleep problem is get someone to really worry about it.
Yeah, of course, it makes sense. But only kind of when you hear it said out loud like you've just done. And then I wonder whether we can just touch upon what you just mentioned about getting sunlight in the morning, because this has been a bit of a revelation for me. And mainly I would say that is due to listening to the Andrew Huberman podcast. I don't know if you know who he is.
Oh, I do know it, yeah.
Yeah, the Huberman Lab podcast. And this is a thing. He always says, like, this is what he bangs on about all the time. And he just... he's got a firm belief that this is the one thing that everyone should be doing, getting outside and getting in the sunlight before 11 a.m., even if it's cloudy. And that's to do with the circadian rhythm, isn't it? I don't know if you want to kind of take it from there, because I know what I've heard about it, but you are the expert.
This is something I also am very passionate about. It's we're learning so many interesting things about the impact of light on human functioning, and similarly to sleep. I mean, those two things are so interrelated, but they're both such basic things, fundamental to our functioning as humans, but also things that we can access on a day-to-day basis. So in terms of prevention of those more negative outcomes that we talked about before, these are very easy things. They're preventative measures that everyone could be using. Daylight is something that I'm particularly interested in, because I've struggled with sleep a lot when I was younger, especially. I think, like you, I was told how much sleep I should be getting, what time I should go to bed. Those things didn't help me because my sleep needs didn't. I don't sleep a lot compared to your kind of average amount of sleep that people get. So trying to achieve those kinds of goals was really unhelpful for me. And it was only when I started to learn more about sleep and started to investigate all of these different ways we can improve our sleep that I found that daylight is actually one of the things that has a massive impact for me. We all respond differently to all of those bits of advice you get, like with the exercise, with the bedtimes, with the duration of sleep, the daylight. All of those things need to be personalized, because none of us need exactly the same stuff in order to get good sleep. So one of the things I did when I was learning about my own sleep was to play around with some of that stuff to see what worked best for me. And the two things that had the biggest impact on my sleep was getting daylight early in the morning, as soon as I got up, go out for a walk, and exercising regularly. So simple.
So simple, but it can have a profound effect. And yeah, I know from my own experience, it's kind of like my happiest time of the day is when I know I'm in a very privileged position that even before I go to school and teach my year 5 class, I do kind of create a bit of time. We're talking in the summer at the moment. It might not be the case in the winter, but getting outside and getting to the park and reading my book with a hot drink or something like that. And there is just something about it. Like in the moment, it makes me feel great, but I also think that it makes me feel more energized and focused for the whole day. And then I think it also means that I get to sleep that much quicker in the evening as well. And I guess we've all felt the effects of that in the winter, haven't we? When we're not getting as much sunlight and people can be affected that way. Maybe that's another conversation. I don't know. But I don't know if you have any it's hard to say kind of any tips around getting out in the morning. I guess it's just one of those things, just make time for it. It's really worth it, isn't it, to make time for it? And I know it can be difficult for someone like a teacher who wakes up, maybe looks after a family, gets them all ready, and they're like, come on, Sam, you're telling me to get outside for 10 minutes. Really, I just have not got the time for that. So I don't know the response to that. I don't know how you would respond to that.
I mean, I have so many views on this. I think part of the trouble here is that a lot of the information we all receive about our own health now is about what we need to do as individuals, but actually we're often living lifestyles in our societies that make it really hard for us to achieve those things. So then it becomes just another thing we're failing at. As a psychologist, I'm a firm believer in a phrase I heard recently that describes my approach, which is push it where it moves, a bit like the game Jenga. So find where you can manipulate that. What's the easiest thing that you can do? And the getting daylight part, I think if you try it out and you feel that you notice it's having a massive impact, you're going to be way more motivated to do it anyway and to factor that into your day. But if that's hard for you, then find a simple way to do that. You don't need to go out for an hour-long walk in the morning before you start work. Most people are probably not going to be able to do that. But you could drink your morning coffee sitting next to a window. Even that's going to have some impact. Anything you can do. I think for teachers especially, this is interesting because they're not really in control of their own time. You're working to a teaching timetable all day, and I've worked in lots of schools. I know how this is. I know that those bits of downtime are so few and far between, and sometimes you've gone the whole day and you've not set foot outdoors. There's loads of reasons why that's not great for your physical and mental health. But trying to find ways to do that, whether it's just kind of walking around the block where your classroom's based for 5-10 minutes, all of those things will help. And it will help you feel good about yourself as well, because you kind of tick that off. You've done something good for yourself. The earlier in the day you can do that, the better, because that matches our circadian rhythm. Ideally, you're aiming for 20 plus minutes of bright daylight as soon as you wake up in the morning. That's the thing that's going to set you off really well for sleep that evening. But anything you can get that's close to that is going to help as well.
Right. Yeah, great to hear. And what you mentioned about going for a walk around the block, around the classroom, that's something that I've shared because I was kind of thinking, right, I've heard this advice from a neuroscientist, Andrew Huberman. I've heard it from other people as well. So how does that apply to the life of someone that works in a school? Well, and I posted a video about it quite recently. Well, why don't you try, just as soon as you've got everything set up in the classroom, take a little walk around the playground. And like you said, maybe you take your hot drink, your coffee or your tea out and sit outside in the morning. And the other suggestion I made was if you've got a meeting in the morning that normally you'd be sat down for, well, take it outside, or even
Absolutely.
just grab a colleague and say, I think this could. I'm struggling to sleep at the moment. I've heard this helps, so can we buddy up and go for a quick 5-minute walk every morning? A little thing like that could be really impactful, couldn't it?
Tiny things. Park your car a little bit further away from your normal spot. Get off the bus one stop earlier. I think as well, if people notice that has a big impact for them on their sleep, then you're weighing up pros and cons here, aren't you? And thinking in about how to structure these things into your day. But if that leads to you having a way more restful night's sleep, then the cycle continues from there, and you end up being more energized, more productive, more efficient. So actually maybe getting up that little bit earlier to go for a walk in the sunshine then starts to become a bit easier.
Yeah, and perhaps you are more, like you said, efficient and productive and in getting everything ready in the morning, so that then you've created that time and it's just this positive cycle. And the other thing you mentioned about how, well, we're kind of fighting against our society, aren't we, and the culture around work and everything. And I think Matthew Walker is another person that's talked about why do we start school so early, and maybe I won't talk about that now. Maybe that might be a deeper
Don't
conversation.
Get me started.
But exactly. But it's another interesting point, isn't it, that I've thought about and maybe listeners have thought about as well, that if we started school later, then especially for teenagers, I think it would be most effective, wouldn't it? That give them the sleep that they actually need. Start later, and then also there's so many things that could be fit fit in the morning, like some exercise, like getting outside, like just not rushing around. But yeah, I won't spring that on you because that wasn't part of one of the questions I was going to.
I love talking about it. I'm happy to do it.
Oh, really? Maybe that could be a part two. A part two.
Yeah. I'll come back and do a whole hour on that.
Sounds great. So, I mean, you've already offered so many tips, and it's been great to, see your passion around sleep. We've heard a little bit about your background in psychology, and then and now you're working with families, aren't you, in schools to help children sleep better. So can we move on to that topic now? Young people. Is there anything that you'd like to say about why sleep's so important for young people?
Yeah. I mean, thinking about some of those trajectories of people who have poor sleep, some of those negative outcomes that can come from sleep. I think childhood is a really fundamental time to start addressing some of those sleep needs and to make sure that we're helping children and young people to form really good habits that will set them off well into the future. The prevalence of sleep difficulties in this age group is really, really high. I mean, especially high in teenagers, but it's the research says between 25 to 40% of children and young people at any one time have some kind of sleep difficulty or disorder. I think the disorders often go unrecognized as well because they can look like other things. And also young people are not as self-aware, so they're not going to recognize necessarily that it's sleep that might be causing those problems. Mm-hmm. Those numbers are even higher in populations like groups with special educational needs, children with autism, ADHD, and also those numbers have gone up with COVID as well, which has been quite disruptive to a lot of people's sleep. So all of that, a huge range of people there within our society who are not getting good sleep or not getting enough sleep. And I think they're in school every day. And this is a really great opportunity for us to help them develop good habits into the future. I think for teachers especially, this is really interesting because the kinds of things that we see in this age group they're similar to for adults in a lot of ways, but difficulties regulating emotions and behaviors, difficulties relating to others, difficulties problem solving, all of those kinds of things that come with poor sleep have a huge knock-on effect to how children get on at school. And can look like something else. So I think it's fundamentally something that we could be addressing really much better in a school context because we've got that captive audience there. As I said before, everyone has sleepless nights sometimes, and during exam periods and things like that, there will be more stressful times, which will impact on sleep. But it's that cumulative effect, and that's something that we need to look out for. Are our school children sleeping badly often, or are they getting enough sleep? Are they getting good quality sleep? If they're not, they're coming into school tired. They're not going to enjoy school so much. They're not going to be motivated. They're going to struggle, and that's going to then feed into that lack of motivation as well. So the escalation of those difficulties and the wide-ranging impact of those difficulties can the effect can be so lasting and so detrimental. So I think it's a really great forum to be addressing some of these needs. The other thing, I guess, is that children and young people are so reliant on us to help them figure this stuff out, and parents as well. I work with parents and schools because I think for parents these things can be really isolating. If they've got children at home who are not sleeping, that can be incredibly hard for them. The whole family is probably tired, and we all know what it's like to try and problem solve and deal with stuff when we're tired. And they're home alone and they're trying to get their child to go to sleep or trying to get them up in the morning. And maybe the school don't recognise that that's what's going on at home, or maybe the school are trying to provide some sleep education, but the parent doesn't know how to deal with that, how to implement that stuff. I think it's really important that we're all working together on this stuff. Parents often will go to maybe their GP if they have a child that's not sleeping very well, but GPs don't have much training in this, and they're likely to see that child in their office or in their clinic. So actually schools are so useful because all of those things that we know are associated with poor sleep are things that teachers can see really easily and can help monitor and keep track of.
Yeah. No, I think that's such an interesting point to make. some parallels with nutrition as well. Lots of people will go to a doctor around nutrition, won't they? And I can't speak for every doctor, but it seems like that isn't a massive part of their medical training. And yet we see doctors as kind of like the person that will be able to answer all the questions, but maybe they haven't had that education. So I guess sleep is the same situation. But like you said, we've got a captive audience at schools, and so my interpretation of what you are saying is that we really should be promoting sleep and talking about sleep at schools, because it's not something that I think was talked about when I was at primary school, as a child. But I think, I'm thinking more and more, well, how can I bring it to my school, and how can we bring it to other schools? Like really make this a priority and get everyone sleeping better. Because I do sometimes think, if I've had a bad night's sleep, I'm really struggling with my colleagues and to do my work and to handle things and to focus. So what's it like for a 7 or 8 year old that hasn't slept as well? It just must be so incredibly difficult. And so what kind of, are there any quick wins, if a mum or a dad, a parent, a carer, whatever is listening to this, or teachers are listening, are there any things that you would offer now, any tips that you would offer to help young children with their sleep, which I know you've already said is very individualized, so I don't know how easy that question is to answer, but if there's anything you'd like to say, I'd be really interested to hear.
Yeah, I might go a bit wide ranging on this, so maybe you rein me in a little bit. But because there are so many ways. I think teachers actually have. There's so much potential in schools and with teachers. One of the things that's happening more is that sleep is starting to be included in health and wellbeing curriculums. It's kind of late to the party. It's not been included very much until quite recently. And like with any of those types of curriculums, it's very much about how it's delivered and how it's embedded. So sleep education on its own tends to not have much impact. So I've worked with a number of schools who want to get an expert in to give an hour's talk and talk to parents, students, teachers about how to get good sleep. What tends to change there is that they know more about sleep, but they don't really change their behaviour. So it's helpful, but not on its own. So I think the key thing really is about working together with the experts. And by experts, I mean all of us. I might be the sleep expert, but actually the parents have their own expertise that they're bringing to the table. And so do the teachers, the educators, everyone in the school. Working together is the most effective way to address this. Because of that need for that personalised approach as well, because we can apply that to thinking about a particular child who's not sleeping, but also we can look at our whole school community and think, well, why is our school community not sleeping well? Actually, there are things that we could change at that level that would be really useful. So taking that more collaborative problem-solving kind of approach can be really helpful. I think what often can happen is people want to give help and advice on sleep, but it tends to be the really generic stuff. Which you can find on the internet, really. And it's another thing that parents might feel bad about if they're not managing to achieve those things. So actually, one of my key messages is really about how to understand your own sleep better. What do you need? What helps you feel rested? It might be really different to what your colleague or your students or your family members need as well. And how do you then change your lifestyle in order to maximize the things that are going to work for you? So there's no one size fits all approach. It's also really good to help children and young people to start thinking in that way anyway about their health, because at some point they'll be making these decisions on their own. We don't actually know how much any individual needs, how much sleep any particular individual needs. They need to figure that out, and we need to help them to be able to do that. And it changes over time. It changes with hormonal changes. It changes as we get older. It changes with stress, with different lifestyle changes. So actually helping children to recognise what they need and helping families and teachers to recognise what they need is, I think, where the good stuff really happens.
Yeah. Again, like so many other areas of well-being, it's that awareness first, isn't it? Like, knowing that this is an important area of lifestyle and thinking, okay, well, what is the situation now? And like you said, I mean, it could be a case of a notebook and a pen by the bed, couldn't it? What did you do? And are you waking up feeling refreshed or are you not, and what could that be? And then you provide yourself with your own answers, your own answers, don't you? Quite interesting. So personalized, but then and getting experts like yourself in to really kind of tailor something around that school community and that individual family. Really important point.
And there's a lot of useful stuff about sleep hygiene all over the internet. I've got a checklist on my website, in fact, as well. That's a kind of bringing together of all the kind of key stuff that I come across that seems to be useful for families in particular. But I encourage people to look at those things in a, like I say, very personalised way. So here are things that help a lot of people with sleep. Work out, do they help you with sleep? Things like, what time did I go to bed? How many hours of sleep do I think I got? Did I wake up feeling refreshed? I was having a conversation with a family just recently, in fact, who said, "Oh, my son's been waking up more often in the night, so we're worried about that." So I asked, "Well, how did they have trouble getting back to sleep?" No, back asleep within 10 minutes. Okay, that's actually really common. And how tired are they? Oh, they don't seem any more tired. Okay, well, then that's not a problem. I can't see any reason why that's a problem. I think we don't spend enough time just thinking about how we feel about sleep, and whether we do actually feel rested. We expect to feel tired, and sometimes that's not sleepiness. In fact, sometimes it's fatigue. We're worn out from work, or we just expect to feel tired because we stayed up a bit later. But actually spending some time thinking about our own levels of tiredness is really crucial there.
Yeah, definitely. And like we said about it's that expectation, and we have got into that situation, haven't we? That culture in society of, you're expected to be tired all the time. The amount of times you go into school and say, "How are you?" "Yeah, tired." Oh, okay. Everyone is tired, and I completely understand that. But how do we get to this situation where everyone is tired all the time and thinks that that's acceptable? I don't want to live in that world. I want to live in a world where everyone is feeling well rested, which I know might sound a little bit but
I'm an idealist too.
Well, this is the thing, and of course there are jobs where that will not be the case. Shift workers and things like that. That's kind of a different story. But if we're a teacher going into school, or a TA, whatever position in a school, you have the right to be going into school every day feeling well rested and not sleep deprived, and not thinking, well, this is just part of the job, so I just need to suck it up and get on with it.
I'd really like to I try to shift the conversation around sleep as well to make it more positive, because there is, like I said at the beginning, there's a lot of kind of scaremongering and a lot of talk about how tired we all are. And although I think that's important to acknowledge, I think it can get a little bit competitive as well. I've worked in schools where the culture is, how many hours of sleep did you get last night? 4. Well, I only had 3, And if you're promoting good sleep, you're kind of not fitting within that box. It can make people feel a little uncomfortable. I think it's especially difficult for teachers, and typically teachers have sleep that is similar to teenagers in some ways, in that they tend to feel very tired during the day. They tend to not be getting enough sleep during the week, and then they try and catch up on it at the weekends. It's the sort of boom or bust lifestyle that teachers have, I think, where during term time you're going flat out. You don't have much of a rest period between stopping work and starting work again. And that's something we know is linked to good quality sleep, having a substantial gap there. So you've got an opportunity to get good sleep. So you're not trying to cram it into the specified 7 hours or whatever you've given yourself. And the same applies to thinking around homework. That some children and young people are doing so much homework, they don't have much downtime. And then sleep is something that needs to be squeezed into the day. And that's a terrible way to try and get good sleep. It adds so much pressure.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Oh, man. It's so true. Yeah, that competition around sleep as well. Like you mentioned, I've seen that, witnessed it on social media. So, right. Come on, listeners. Let's celebrate how much sleep we're getting and go in, try and do our best to address it, and then say, I've made these changes and now I'm sleeping so much better. Let me share them with you, and hopefully we can create more of a culture around celebrating good sleep and having naps as well. I was talking about this the other day. Let's celebrate naps sometimes. I have naps, and
I'm a fan.
Have a nap. Oh, good. That's good to hear from a sleep expert. But I sometimes have them after school, and I've shared that. And there's something about it though that you feel worried about telling people you've had a nap, because then they must think, well, why weren't you busy? Like, how could you not be busy? How dare you have a nap during the week? But another thing that I think we should try and celebrate.
Yeah, it's something maybe about productivity and the need to try and seem efficient all the time, isn't it? I've been working in Singapore the last few years, and there's a lot of that kind of talk there, where like sleep is a waste of time. You need to minimize that because you need to be productive all the time. Whereas actually getting good sleep and getting enough sleep makes us way more productive, and that's the conversation we should be having. And for teachers especially, all of your students are hearing those conversations. So that's all filtering through for them. The positive comments we could be making about how much good sleep you've had and how great you feel about that and how you've done that. That's fantastic learning for them. We could have a shift here. We could shift that culture just incrementally through all of those conversations.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's keep the conversations going for sure. And so we've touched on young children, and what we can do for them, and we also kind of touched on teachers as well, and how we can address their sleep. But do you have any other thoughts around kind of the specific sleep needs of teachers and teaching assistants and anyone else that works in a school?
Yeah, it's a tricky lifestyle. I think it's quite unique in that you don't, as a teacher, you don't have maybe as much autonomy and control over your own time because you're bound by the school term and school day. So, as with all of my advice, you need to think about how you can personalize it. I'm not gonna give any kind of rigid rules about what I think people should be doing, but it's really about how to apply some of this thinking in a way that's going to suit you. I think one of the last things I just said was about that rest period between stopping and starting work. That can have a huge impact. So making sure that you do have that downtime so that you're not trying to squeeze sleep in. That's something that certainly got worse with COVID as well, because those boundaries got a bit blurrier about when work finishes and begins again. I think an additional challenge for teachers especially is the term time versus school holiday issue, and for parents as well, same thing. You're during the school holidays, schedules shift massively, and that's not necessarily a terrible thing, but getting good sleep is really about having good patterns, daytime and nighttime patterns. So for teachers, same advice I'd be giving adolescents in particular is trying to keep those timings as similar as possible, not rigidly, but it's a lot easier for your body to get good sleep if you're sticking to a fairly regular routine. The amount of time you're awake, while you're awake, your sleep drive is increasing all the time to the point where you can easily fall asleep. So if you start messing around with the time that you wake up, then your sleep drive shifts. So then the next day, you're much more likely to go to bed much later, and that's going to get worse and worse over the course of a school holiday, which is going to make it way harder when you suddenly have to get up at 7 a.m. on the first day of term. I think that there's individual things that teachers can do for their own sleep, but I also think in terms of what it's like being a teacher and working with sleep-deprived children and young people, there are things that teachers can be doing that can help those children, but will ultimately help you be able to teach them more easily as well, because of those outcomes that we talked about. People who are sleep deprived are less able to regulate their emotions, less able to problem solve. So if we're addressing some of those needs, then actually teaching becomes easier as well and less stressful. You're not dealing with as many behavioural issues in the classroom. Your students are likely to achieve better. Poor sleep is linked to lower school achievement. One of the things, if teachers can factor this in, is to, I think it's maybe it's easier for primary school than secondary school teachers, is to consider the content and the style of what you're teaching during the day as well. Because school starts a bit too early for most people, that first hour or two of school, teachers and students included are probably all quite tired, or a lot of them are quite tired. So actually that's when we're at our low point in terms of ability to problem solve. So hitting them with a really difficult maths lesson first thing in the morning, a lot of them are just not going to do as well at it, and they're not going to enjoy it as much. So where there is capacity to shift around the school day, fantastic. Getting them out into the sunlight first thing in the morning, those sorts of things. So there's some changes that can be made to the way that the school day is structured, and sometimes that could be for an individual teacher, but sometimes that could be more of a whole school approach. Also, just being really aware of what to look out for when it comes to school sleep difficulties, because I think you as teachers, you know your students in a really unique way. As an educational psychologist, I will only see any of those children a handful of times, so I don't know what normal is for any of them. Whereas you have the benefit of seeing that child over the whole of the school year and see how things change for them, so you can really start to figure out, is there a sleep difficulty here? How have things changed for this child?
Yeah, really important points. So many of these things, like what if we were actually taking the research and the opinions of experts and applying it to the school day instead of kind of just carrying on with business as usual? Like if we know this about imagine if we know this about early morning sunlight, and if we know this about I don't know, other aspects of learning and focus and concentration, why aren't we applying them in schools? And that would be amazing to see, wouldn't it? More just getting children and staff out in the morning, every morning, and what a difference that could make. And your other point about routines, I think is really key as well. And that's something that from my experience and people that I know have experienced as well, because I think like anyone, late teens and early 20s, you would kind of work or study during the week, and then at the weekend you'd have some kind of big blowout, wouldn't you? And you'd be up, and then you kind of really suffer for that on that Monday morning. Whereas now, even on a Friday or a Saturday, you can get accused of being boring, can't you? But I still go to bed or not every single weekend, but most weekends still go to bed at the same time. 9:30 on a Friday night is a little bit sad, but I'm okay with it because I enjoy my mornings, and it means exactly. And if it means that I can be up at 6 a.m. doing the thing that I do love doing, which is being outside and reading my book or getting to the gym nice and early, then I think we should, if you're a listener and you're thinking, that kind of applies to me as well, just have that kind of confidence and just be sure of yourself that that's fine. I'm going to go with it.
Yeah.
I've heard
and
that
tell people about it, admit it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, share it on social media.
But there are other people doing the same. They just probably don't want to say it out loud either.
Exactly. That's what it is, isn't it? For sure. Oh, definitely. Oh, well, Nicola, you've covered so much, and thank you so much again for your time. I think we've talked about children, we've talked about us adults as well, working in a school, all the different things that we can be thinking about just around that awareness, that individualization, and all these different things are so important. So I'm just really, really pleased to get a sleep expert on the show and sharing all that information.
Thanks. I love talking about sleep. So as you might be able to tell.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. And so as we kind of get to the end of our conversation, there's a couple of questions, as you've seen, that I like to always ask my guests. And the first one of those is your 3 tips to thrive, your kind of 3 top tips. Are there 3 takeaways from this conversation that my audience can go away and apply today? And that doesn't have to be related to sleep necessarily, just anything around health and well-being that you would like to summarize at this point.
Yeah, it's hard to narrow it down to 3, but I've given it some thoughts, and I've picked 3. So I guess my top one really is learn about what you need. So if any of your listeners have been reflecting on what we've been talking about here, this might be a good time to revisit what your own sleep needs are. So are you giving yourself enough opportunity to get the kind of sleep that you need? Are you tired? Or are you just going for that 8 hours a night goal or whatever it is you've set for yourself? So really understanding what your own sleep needs are and taking a bit of time to explore that would be my top tip. The second one I want to suggest is concentrating more on what you're doing when you're awake. So the more we learn about sleep, the more we know it's not just about what happens at night when you're not conscious. It's all the stuff you do during the day that leads into a good night's sleep. So all those things we've been talking about with your daytime routines, daylight, exercise, all of that stuff, having a break between starting work again, thinking about how to structure your day in a way that will lead to good sleep instead of just focusing on bedtime routines, how many hours of sleep that you've had. So flip that around. And the third thing I'd love to suggest is to just spend, for any teachers listening, to just spend a bit of time thinking about the students in your class and think about, are there any students that are now thinking could have some sleep needs that are not being addressed? Some of those different behaviours and learning difficulties that we were discussing earlier, could those things actually be linked to poor sleep? In which case, maybe there's something different I could be doing to help them.
Yeah. Oh, 3 really important tips. Thank you for sharing. And kind of the second one really resonated with me. It reminds me of another quote that I think I heard. We started this episode with a quote, and let's perhaps end one with a quote as well. But it was something around a good night's sleep starts from the moment you wake up. And I guess that kind of sums it up. It does, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
It's about all the things that you do during the day. And it's kind of like we can't expect to be running around and stressed all day, and then as soon as we put our head on the pillow, just lights out and fall asleep. And again, that's a wider conversation and not an easy fix or anything like that. The various reasons why people are so stressed during the day, but it's something to consider, isn't it? Well, what can you do to minimize or manage, and whatever kind of approaches that work for you? That might be a kind of approach that you take to physical activity, or that you take to just feeling more calm generally during the day, might well have I think very likely will have a knock-on effect on your sleep, won't they?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so the final question that we finish off with is, what's that one lesson you wish you had been taught when you were a child?
I feel like this might seem obvious now, given some of the conversations we've had today. But I wish I'd been taught that sleep is something that's really individual. As someone who was a poor sleeper throughout childhood, I had very sensible parents who tried to send me to bed at what they thought was the right time for me and tried to help me get the number of hours of sleep that they thought I needed. But what that led to was lots of nights of me. I probably needed less sleep, in fact. I would think that's what was going on. So I spent a lot of time lying awake in bed, not able to sleep. And that's something that feeds into chronic sleep problems. So I think knowing earlier that sleep is something that is really personal, and understanding your own sleep needs better probably would have led to a lot less sleepless nights for me.
Yeah. It's one of those tricky ones, isn't it? I love the question, but then at the same time, it does make people look back and go, oh gosh, that was just, the kind of pain that was caused. And, I've answered that question myself and I've thought about it. And so many different things where you look back and go, oh, like the amount of the amount of sleepless nights that you went through because of not knowing this stuff, and through no fault of your own or anyone's fault. It's just one of those things, isn't it? But that's great to hear, your reflection, thinking, right, it's personalized, it's individual. Don't compare yourself to friends, family, and social media telling you exactly how much sleep you need and exactly what you need to do. Let's find what works for you. Love it.
And it might have been lots of sleepless nights for me, but it's certainly fueled my passion for sleep and kind of brought me to the position I'm in at the moment, where it's something I'm specializing in. So I have a lot of empathy for people who are not sleeping well.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so before I let you go, can you let our listeners know where they can connect with you? Social media, website, anything that you'd like to mention here about how people can get in touch with you?
Yep. I would love to hear from your listeners. I love having conversations about sleep, especially with people in schools, because of all those things we've talked about the role of teachers, how impactful they can be. My website is www.thefamilysleepconsultant.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram as well. I'm fairly new to the social media platforms at the moment, but what I'm hoping to do is to create some sense of community in those groups, and that's why I've set them up. So if people want to be part of a conversation with other teachers or other parents about sleep, then join those social media platforms, because I will be starting to post more stuff on there about workshops and events and advice and stuff like that. My website covers details about the kind of work I do, individual work with families, but also the ways that I can work with school as well. And there'll be stuff on there periodically about different workshops that I do. And there's a resources page with various other tips and things that people can check out, some interactive stuff that people can do on there. So please have a look, but also get in touch with me as well, because I'm really open to collaborating with schools on this stuff. I just think it's where the best work can be happening, really. So if anyone's particularly interested in talking about what's happening in their school, especially get in touch with me.
Fantastic. And I'll put all of those links in the show notes. So yeah, listeners, just click on those. You'll be able to find all the links to Nicola's website and her social media as well. Brilliant. Well, thank you again for your time, and I will let you enjoy the rest of your lovely looking break.
Thank you, Samuel.
Okay, there you have it. Thank you again to Nicola for joining us. I hope you enjoyed that episode. I hope it kind of answered any questions you might have around sleep, and perhaps inspired you to think more carefully about your individual sleep needs and what you can do to address this area of your well-being. As I mentioned at the end of the episode, all of the links to find out more from Nicola, the resources that she offers and the community that she is building as well. All of those links are in the show notes, so do have a quick look at those. If you did enjoy the episode, then please share with friends, family and colleagues who you think might be interested. And also, if you can take a couple of seconds to like the show on whatever app you're listening to this podcast, to rate it, to follow it, that would be fantastic, and it would really help me spread the word to more educators. Right, thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to bringing you another episode soon.